Behind every success story, there is a long line of triumphs and defeats that remain hidden from others. These stories get condensed into journeys that minimize the struggle and wrap up with a happy ending. But we know that's not how life works. That's where From the Ashes with Mark Azoulay comes in. On today's show, you'll hear honest conversations about the challenges that Mark's guest faced and how they overcame adversity. Now, here is your host, Mark Azoulay.
Welcome back to another episode of From the Ashes. I'm sitting here with Nicolina Werther, who is a trauma-informed success coach that works in workplaces for people that are creative, that are highly sensitive, or that are entrepreneurs. I'm really excited to talk to you. What actually I want to dive right away. What stood out about your website to me was the space consultation that you do around having people set up offices and workspace. That's something that I read a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport that talks a lot about that, and I really dug into that recently. But I'm curious, where you got into that, what that is like? What kind of consultation do you do?
Yes, I feel a bit like website shame now. Oh gosh, it's not up to date. But so I haven't actually done that since COVID. But yeah, it's still in the mix, and I might pick it up. Yes, I don't know how I got into it. It might have been, I think, Feng Shui and, Marie Kondo and all the stuff that's around. I did read the book as well, even though, I forgot about that part from it. For me, it's everything. The environment is, of course, super important. And I do talk about it a lot, even if it's not physically in the space of, how you can arrange things to make them work for you. And I don't know if you want to delve into that maybe further down. But yeah, it's just part of everything. And I just love space. It's just a thing I always had, like anything spatial, it just excites me. So I guess it just, at some point I was just like, actually, no. I read a book called Soul Space once by Xavis Balbes or something. I think he has designed a lot of the really fancy homes on the West Coast. And that was, I think there were so many examples of all the different things and what they tell you about, like, where you are emotionally, or, how it influences you and how you do things, how you do life, how you work, or whatever. And it was just fascinating. I think that's how originally I started it. I was just like, wow, it kind of tells you, it's like, it's an extension of you, space. So
100%. Yeah, I think we have the same similarity there. I would love one of my, when I have more time, is to study interior design and to study Feng Shui. I'd love to really go deep into that. It's something that I've come to appreciate as I owned a condo, and I do home improvement stuff all the time. I'm really particular about my space, and it's really interesting because I've seen it have significant impacts on my mental health and on my productivity. So it was kind of cool looking at your website and see, oh yeah, wow, she made a service out of that.
Yeah, cool. And it's like even small things. I remember for a while I struggled with eating disorder, or binge eating and all that stuff. And I used to like all these pictures of, nice cafes and just normal pictures of not even any particular healthy foods, but still food. And then at some point, when I was really digging into what's going on, it's like, well, there are food pictures around you. I'm not sure if that's how you want to cue your brain all this time. And so, I took them out, at least for a while. I think these days I don't mind anymore. They can come back, but it's just so interesting to see all these things that influence us subconsciously. And yeah, is it a straight line? Is it a curved line? Do how does it influence your creativity and all these things?
Yeah, it's really cool. I think we could wrap on that for a while. Have you read the book, The Design of Everyday Things?
I don't think so, no.
That's a really good one if you're interested in it. It talks about how things literally a mug is designed, or a fork, and how you should only be able to do one thing with it. It should kind of inform you as to the function of it based on exactly what it looks like. And I think of space as very similarly, as having, it gives you instruction about how to be in it and lets you know, how to work, how to live, how to relax.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a beauty. If we want to delve deeper into it, that you can, you go through all areas, sleeping, workspace, communal spaces, and everyone has their own little story, and you can arrange it to what you want it to do for you, really.
Yes, maybe we'll loop back around to that, but I want to kick off with the topic of the podcast, the From the Ashes story. So tell us a little bit about your story, how you got into coaching, trauma-informed coaching and sensitivity training. What what was it like growing up?
What was it growing up? Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm a therapist,
Um,
Joe. You gotta dig right into that stuff. Tell me about your mother. Tell me about your
ex-
childhood.
well, she might pull up. Who knows? Um, to be honest, like for me, well, personal development, spiritual development didn't find me until a bit more than a decade ago, I would say. And then coaching a bit further down the line, and trauma informed coaching further down the line, even still. And I think, in a way, I feel like I grew up pretty clueless. Like, even though there's a psychotherapist in my extended family, and now also in my close family, but back then that was the only person I think. I honestly, I just didn't know. I was just, as many of us, just stumbling through life and not really knowing what I wasn't. I sometimes think I maybe wasn't the most ambitious person in that I just didn't understand that you can have dreams and you can go for them, and that you might have to learn a few things while you do that, but that's something to kind of strive for in a healthy way. So I think I was more aiming around trying different things, very drawn to the performing arts as a way to express myself, I think. And then trying to do that in my adult life. But then at some point, things just started to crumble. Because I had neither the inner resources nor any outer strategies of how to make stuff happen, as I like to say. So that's, how it started. I don't know if you want me to explain anything
Yeah.
more in
Is
depth.
there like a story that can paint that pattern of trying to make something happen but not having the skill required or not having the belief in yourself or something?
I think in a way I'm still figuring that out. Like I said, I mean, like the performing arts is definitely the thing that drew me most. So first, I think musical acting, then no, first dancing, then acting, then music or whatever, and then I circled back around to some of them. And but I never like it's a bit funny because I also have a health condition which kind of always meant like, oh, you can't be a dancer, you can't be an actress. So there was like already at that, like even before I even thought, oh, maybe you want to do that professionally, there was kind of always this, well, you can't do it anyway, which might have influenced the whole thing of, well, why should you even try? Even though I did try at some point, but I think without really that inner conviction that you need, like especially with the creative things or, things that are like you're passionate about or that are close to your heart, where you really like, you do need to have the inner dedication and really need to want it. Otherwise, like the first setback and you, or at least the second or third, at some point you just give up because you're like, well, I just wanted to have a good time and this is not what I expected, kind of thing, I think.
Yeah, I remember there's a quote by like on his name, but he's the creator of Bugs Bunny, right? The cartoon character. And he has a quote where he says, everyone has 300 bad paintings in them. The good artists get them out faster.
Yeah, faster, and also actually they get them out. I think that's the other thing I would say. It's just like sticking to it and like trying again, and like all the things that are more the soft skills of, okay, you don't feel great about it, or there's doubt, or you feel like, oh, you can't, you're worried someone's not gonna like it or whatever. I mean, that are more the soft skills, but I definitely had to learn those first before I then realized I might have to dig a bit deeper to get even more resources online. But even those, they're so important because if you don't have them, your belief in yourself gets undermined pretty quickly. And that's the other bit. If you then don't have that inner, I don't even know what you want to call it, sense of self, inner self-trust, inner belief in yourself, whatever, what do you fall back on? There's nothing. Like, at least for me, like my personality is that of, I think I never had a healthy sense of self growing up because I've just not been taught it. And yes, there possibly were things growing up that weren't ideal. As far as I know, nothing super intense, but, even something like a bit of emotional neglect, a bit of, tension in the household, maybe family member not being very well themselves, like all these things, that's still enough potentially to not build you up in a way that you can then thrive in a healthy way in life. I mean, there's a whole theory if some people are more sensitive than others. And I'm always like, oh, I work with sensitive people, I should know about this. I find that a really tricky one, because I know there's the one camp which says, yeah, some people are wired more sensitive, so they do react more to these things. And then there's the whole thing about, well, you could be hypervigilant because of, for example, difficult childhood experiences or something. And like, where's the line? I don't know. Like, for me, it doesn't even matter. It's like, what matters is like, can someone, like, how do they behave? Can they do it or can they not do it? And what do they need to be able to move through something?
Yeah, I think I work very similarly. The cause is not as important as what's actually coming into the room. Yeah. And I think where I'm on that, I think most of it is actually conditioning. There may be some biological piece as far as sensory processing disorders, and to be some research there showing that people can just perceive sensation, literally stimulus, way more intensely. But I think a lot of it is what you're talking about, is emotional neglect, some minor traumas, misattunement, things like that then get triggered and throws into that regressed place where we're all of a sudden acting from our past self, the child self that doesn't have a sense of self, or that feels very afraid or very angry or feels threatened. And then person ends up being a lot more reactive.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we all have different ways of how we then deal with that. And I'm a huge fan of just like, I think that we met during some summit, and you were talking about personality types and how they play out, which I really liked. And I like personality models too, but the one that I like more than any other, I think, is just the basic 4 trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, fawn, because I find they explain you so much of how you deal with anything that I mean, they're my favorite ones, because like once you understand who you are in that one, you understand a lot. Like, for example, I use a creative person who's always in fantasy land, kind of frozen, but not actually going into action. Or do you always get into action, but like maybe, I don't think that applies to you or me, but without the creativity, kind of just doing crazy activity for the sake of activity, which can be great, especially in work. But it might burn you out or not fulfill you, or there might be other reasons why that's not good for you. So
so going back to your story, which one of those did you find yourself stuck in? Were you in that freeze response?
I don't think heavily. I mean, I had and have a wonderful teacher of many years now, who's mostly a coach, teacher, mentor, whatever. I learned a lot from her about, for example, sensitivity and trauma responses and all that. And so sometimes I have to trust her judgment. And that would be that I am a freeze fawn personality, but with flight as well. So I'm definitely not fight. And it's something I always have to work on developing more in myself. I can freeze, but I don't disassociate. So, and that's, again, it's another thing where maybe you know more about it, but I sometimes don't know, like, there's different research out there, I find, depending on who you listen to. Like some people would say freeze is proper freeze, and then I like what's it, Pete Walker's work, which is more about freeze is, for example, going off into Fantasyland, or doing the more mild forms of still functioning, but not necessarily. I don't even know what's the word, like being productive in a contributing way that's building your life, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So that's definitely me. And fawning, definitely, it's just like, or pleasing, whatever you want to call it. I was more the rebel, but that's the other side of the coin of being too much concerned of what other people think about me.
Yeah. So at what point did you start to transition? Right. You talk about not, having poor self-esteem, some insecurities, and not real sense of self, trouble executing on your dreams and vision. But now you're out there. I mean, you're doing stuff. You're a business owner. You're coaching people. Where did that pivot point happen?
To be honest, I'm not one of these people who's like, and one day I woke up and everything
I saw the light and everything was beautiful.
Oh my God, I wish I had this. They sell so great, those stories. I think really slowly over time. So, and I'm still working on it, obviously. I'm still checking, like, how's my nervous system right now? Like, how calm am I? And obviously, luckily, because I had experience with the performing arts, for example, being on stage, being seen was not the issue for me, which I know for many people it can be. Like for me, it's, I think, more around, and I'm still doing that, like finding my voice, finding my message, like standing up for things in life. And that's why I say it's an ongoing journey. And I'm always like, and again, it's a bit of understanding what interests I have on my outside, but also like, again, like for me, it's an inner state of feeling as well. And yeah, it just keeps growing day by day. I think it really, it's just adds up over the years. So from, I can't really say, like, like I said, I don't think there's anything in particular. It just builds up over time. And it, like, for me, it's just, I'm just trying always to reduce the time from idea to action or from idea to result. Like more, that's my journey. Like, how fast can I really make something happen? Because if I don't, then there's something in there which stops me, something internally that's in there. And that's something I watch day by day. Day by day, I get better at things. That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah. Is there a way that you talk to yourself, or a skill or practice that you use to reduce that time?
Awareness, self-awareness.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to. Is like, okay, like, and having brilliant teachers for sure also. And of course, sometimes teachers are books. Yeah, just noticing, like, am I doing this, like coming back to, I don't know if it wasn't deep work as well, but like really being focused on what I want and seeing how much I do that. Or I don't really use the word procrastination so much. And I feel like normally I don't even do it, but do I do the thing that moves the right thing forward? Or do I luckily, I'm not the person who's just, I'm just on, on my bed, I can't do anything. That's not me. I know for some people that can be. And then of course it would be, the first step is, okay, can you get up and what can you do? But then, you just keep building. You keep building. And just for me, like everything I try to do is to build my life in the way that I want it to be. And just noticing, am I on track or not? Am I feeling aligned or not? I mean, we could give it so many different terms of, I like to design things for joy. Like if I know I'm doing something that fills me out, then I feel it. And I know that's how that's what I want to do. I hope that answered your question.
It does. And I think it's funny because I think I can do the same thing. You're talking very humbly about something that is incredibly powerful, which is choosing life, right? This idea of wanting to live and wanting to live a life that is meaningful to you. And I know for a lot of my life, the listeners have heard parts of my story, I didn't have that. So to be able to pivot to that, where you really want to have a life that brings you bliss, that brings you joy, that helps other people, that's huge. That's a very big thing. And it sounds like that as a North Star can be really helpful for you as you're building out this career and making, your dreams come true.
Yeah. And maybe we can explore further down the line, like maybe how to get there if you're not there yet. But yeah, but it's an ongoing journey. Even if you're there, there's always more. That's how I see it.
Of course. Yeah. So we're going to move into our first commercial break. There's a lot of interesting threads to pull on. So if you're listening, stay tuned, and we're going to talk when we come back about, sensitive people, about choosing life, about organizing space, trauma-informed care. There's a lot of great places that we can go. So for those listening there, stay tuned, and we'll catch you on the other side of the commercial break.
In Mark's work with high performers and business owners, it is becoming increasingly clear to him that their biggest obstacle to success is themselves. They are experts in their field, but are dragged down by their anxiety, poor time management, inability to focus, or self-sabotage. His role is to help you overcome these emotional and organizational issues so that you can truly excel in your business and your personal life. One of the most common hurdles that he sees is perfectionism, a crippling anxiety around performance. It's a fear of not being good enough, being publicly embarrassed, or of disappointing others. These fears paralyze brilliant people and bring them to their knees. This course will help you to break free from this mental prison and have more agency in your world. In this online course, we will break down the prison of perfectionism so that you can break out of it. For more information and to sign up, visit mark-azulay.teachable.com. That's Mark, MARC-Azulay, AZOULAY.teachable.com. You are listening to From the Ashes with Mark Azulay. To reach the show today, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. 346-9141 or send an email to podcast@mark-azoulay.com. Now, back to From the Ashes.
So I'm sitting here with Nicolina Werther, and we're talking about developing a sense of self. And this is something I really want to dig into this, right? Because this is something that gets thrown a lot in the psychology world, in the coaching world, in the self-development world. And it's like, people are like, oh, just do it. It's so easy. Just like figure out who you are, be yourself. I mean, you hear it in dating, right? And it's like not that easy. And I think it's also very vague, and it doesn't offer people a pathway or even a definition of what it means to develop a sense of self. So I'm curious, I guess, one, what that process was like for you, and two, what do you really mean by a sense of self as compared to not a sense of self?
So I keep saying that for me, like, these things are ongoing journeys, and I always keep learning. So, and I agree with you that I think a lot of it, often there are these, people give you these outside pointers of, know what you're passionate about or your values or all these things. And they're, of course, really helpful. But just again, like from my experience, I did an embodiment coaching training last year that I kind of stumbled into, but as these things turn out, it was really good. It's also a quite intuitive embodiment coaching training that was developed by, more an intuitive healer, actually. And what, for example, that did for me was similar to, I guess, somatic experiencing or something, that it was just like it shifted something in my body in the way of, like, because I would think, I've been practicing mindfulness for years and I've done all sorts of other awareness practices. So I have a good sense of how I feel, but it took things to a deeper level, and we could talk about which parts of my body or whatever. And it has actually become even more of a feeling like this, like for me, it's connected to this inner sense of trust. And it really is much more, but I mean, that's how I like to work anyway, to see that things are not just cerebral, like knowing, for example, what you like or what you stand for or something, but that it becomes a felt sense. And because of that moment, like it's just, and I find it very hard to talk about it because it's something to feel, and words don't always do it justice. But like, if I try to explain like how it feels to me, it's like I said, mostly I think I would use the word trust and like trusting your gut, trusting your intuition. And with that, of course, something like decision making, then the more practical aspect becomes easier, but really experiencing you on all levels. And I think the scientific terms would be, you have like, all the different forms of perception kind of working that pick up all the different things in your body. Or if you're more spiritual, you would say your energy, however you want to describe it. For me, it's kind of all the same to some extent. How's it for you? Like, what does it mean for you?
Yeah, I think it's similar to what you're saying. It's pretty multifaceted. I think as a side note, I also just started working with a somatic psychotherapist in my own life, and tapping into some of that is new. I mean, I've been in therapy as a client for like a decade, but the idea of actually developing my intuition, I think it's a stereotype, but I think for men in general, we don't have really a lot of connection and communication around that. I think, women have the stereotype of being more intuitive, and I think in some ways that's probably true. I think you all seem to have access to things that we don't as naturally. But that being said, for me, it is that sense of trust that you're talking about. It's a sense of kind of consistency and cohesion, and this ability to kind of gut check myself and gut check my decisions. And and more so than that, it's like trusting and honoring those little micro moments. If I'm going to meet with somebody and I'm just like, or, there's a decision coming up and I'm like, this one feels really bad. If I notice myself like forcing myself and overriding that kind of emotional imprint, then it usually sets me up for failure.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly how I'm experiencing it. And for me, actually, it was my gut that I felt like I perceived more sensations than before. Like I said, I would, because I've done these things where you do body scans and all this stuff, which is fun. I like it actually. But I know I often wouldn't really scan either someone else or me like completely. And it's just, I mean, this is more like the technicalities of these things, but there's literally I feel like there are I'm getting sensations from my body now that I wasn't aware of before. And it's exactly what you described. It's the intuition, it's a gut feeling. It's this just knowing in the moment if something feels right or not. And it's just the things you think, oh, they should be obvious. People are just, oh, just to say to what feels right to you, or, like the basics. But I think for many of us, that's exactly the bit that we didn't learn, or that we couldn't develop when we grow up, because we shut it down, because that's the bit that was scary, right? All the sensations in our bodies and all that stuff. And it's so beautiful if you can actually start developing and then be like, oh, there's a whole other world that gives me information, and it's not even that, ooh, it's just right here in me.
Right. It's real. I think it's worth for our listeners to hear, like, this isn't magic. It's actually like a real thing that you're going to feel. And it's something that is coming online for me, of just being like, whoa, yeah, there are more sensations there. There is a lot more information there than I was aware of.
Absolutely. Yeah. And with that, then actually knowing what works for you or what your values are or something, I think it becomes easy. I mean, values, oh my God, they drove me crazy. Like, especially in the coaching world, it's kind of the first thing someone throws at you. It's like, oh, let's figure out your values. And for years, I've been like, I don't really know. I think it's that. But I'm also, I guess, like many people, I'm very susceptible to the environment I'm in. So wherever I go, it might change. And so I had real trouble kind of being like, oh, that's me, or like, that's the sense of self. It's like being, that's me, and that's what I stand for, and that's how I present myself to myself and to the world. But the moment I find, like, the more I get in touch with myself, the easier it becomes. And again, like, for me, it is funny because yes, it's a journey, and I think similar for you, like, especially when you've been doing a lot of inner work, meditation, and all these things for years, you kind of think, oh, shouldn't have gotten that years ago, but no.
Yeah. I think there's no real timeline on it. I found I had to clear out a lot of pain before I was able to build more positive structures. And I think the value thing was also difficult for me because as a kid growing up, I was very conflict avoidant, and I was unbelievably shy. So I would just be very agreeable, or just not say anything at all, just try to be like easy, to just move things over to kind of like get the attention off me and to keep the conversation going. I would often like observe for a long time, for, hours before even engaging. And then when I would engage, I would create this persona that I thought that people wanted. I would observe them and then deliver the product. And I didn't really develop values through that, because my value at that time, I guess, was just not having attention or being liked maybe, or not having conflict. And a big part of my, recovery journey was developing that sense of self and doing all those exercises about what do I stand for? What does like ethical life mean to me? What is my code of honor? And more importantly, putting myself in some situations that challenged it. Because it's one thing to have it, it's another thing to actually put into practice. Because I don't think it really, for me at least, didn't get cemented until I acted in a way that was in line with my values. And I was like, oh, okay, this is what I'm actually doing. It's real now. It's not just like a list on my wall,
Yeah. And that's, it feels more real. It feels like you're actually experiencing life more. What all the sages, like, and wisdom people always tell you. But actually it becomes visceral in a way, I find. It's more, you do this kind of work. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, early on, it was just, and this is for people that maybe have no idea what we're talking about, or just like, oh my God, how to even start? For me, developing preferences was hard, right? Like, do I want this type of food or that type of food? Or do I want, right? Like, just basic preferences. Like, what's your favorite color? Like, really, what's your favorite color?
Ice cream.
Yeah, get ice cream no matter what.
The worst is like, what?
Or like, what kind of music do you like? I mean, stuff like that. I know that would change for me around other people. I didn't have a sense of self even around preferences, and that was tough, because I'd be curious your experience with it, because as you were talking about, people would ask me, hey, what do you feel about this? And really my answer truly was, I don't know. Like, it wasn't that I was like confused. It's like I didn't even have those channels built to know how I felt about something until I was able to really process it. And for me, it was through therapy that helped me to develop those skills of really figuring out what I actually think and feel about things. It didn't come naturally for me.
Yeah. I think for me, it's a mix. I mean, if I think back at least to teenage years, I like music, for example. I think I did know what I liked, and other things too. But then there's the other aspect of how do you communicate that, or like do you communicate it at all? Or, like my personality, I'm more of an avoidant person. So I'm very good of not sharing. So my challenges are usually more like, hey, talk a bit more about it or share what you actually like, which then, of course, if you actually do that, can reinforce it. And then it kind of builds on that. Like, I've been through phases where I couldn't even decide on which name or which version of my name to use. And people would call me like all sorts of different things. Yeah, of course, that messes then also with my own self-perception, because like, who am I? But the moment I decided, okay, it's just going to be Nicolina now, yeah, things just are easier. So, and like, that's what I meant. Like, you keep doing that. The communicating things. And that's, it just reinforces the whole sense of self thing. And it just all connects to each other. And that's, I find a thing I also really enjoy doing with people is like the whole idea of, speaking up, visibility, using your voice, and all these things that so often I find people don't do. Either they haven't been taught it or they shut it down because it was unsafe to do it, usually growing up or something. That's when people really start to sparkle, and we can uplift people and we can uplift environments, because there's just so much more coming alive. Like, because we all have something inside of us that's magical and awesome and can do something good in the world. Not in a codependent way, for you first. But that's kind of, I think, going a bit back to what we talked about before the break. It's like, how do you tap into that? How do you get there? And how do you bring it out? And how do you, it's inspire the world around you with whatever is important to you? And that's for you to decide.
Yeah. So you do a lot of work in workplaces, and I'm curious, how would you work with a workplace to inspire that magic to come out, right? For people to sparkle in the way that you're talking about.
Yeah.
What are some changes that you often see need to happen?
Yeah, so I'm a mix. Like, I do actually, a lot of people are more like self-employed, and it depends, either self-employed or freelance or employed. It's the same thing, really. It's just a question of how you, it's like asking how you can facilitate it. The core of what they or I want to achieve is still the same, of making every single person as empowered, or whatever you want to call it, as you can, like, as feeling. And that's all the classic things of, how can we create a safe environment? How can we make sure people do speak up or feel safe to speak up, to say what they want, to feel they have agency around the things that they want, like have a collaborative environment, and that kind of all the things that we know make a good environment. Like, how can we facilitate at least some of them? I mean, it really depends. There's some beautiful companies out there. And there are some which you feel like, okay, they're a bit more traditional, maybe, where it feels a bit more, okay, where do we start, kind of thing. And of course, in that, like, if you can work with something like leadership, is always, in a way, the easiest. Because the moment that the person has understood it for themselves, they can see where it's not happening around them, I find, usually.
Yeah, I think that's critical, right? I think emotional health does trickle down. So if you can work with leaders and have them do their deep emotional work, their personal work, get rid of their baggage that they have, from their childhood, and understand how to have their voice, then they all of a sudden, it's so, I think that's why it speaks to the naturalness of it. They become advocates for it everywhere, because they're like, whoa, my life changed. Now that I'm going to use my power to help empower the people on my team.
Absolutely. And you see, like, it feels good to you, but it also, like, even if you were just to look at your bottom line or something, you would see that it makes a difference, because people are more engaged, and they just, they enjoy, hopefully, their work more. Usually it's the engagement that goes up. Like, if you give people more agency, really, or more reason to do the things that lights them up.
Right. They work harder, they work longer, they stay longer, right? They're not ready to jump and find a new job. You want to retrain them. They work above and beyond, and they work more efficiently. And there's, for the small business owners, that's mainly what I focus on. There's a lot less drama. Like, all the drama that you deal with starts to go away, because people can actually communicate preventatively instead of waiting for something to blow up.
And it's that, that's kind of where we come back to environments. It's of course, it's a culture thing. Like, and that's the only bit where I'm like, well, it really depends on what you have kind of to say, okay, what strategy to use. like where do you start really, and like what's actually already there in the culture. Usually there's something that you can start with, like, and just build on it, some quality that works well. I mean, often, like you said, like often I find it is some form of communication is not working very well. But maybe, for example, how, if people are good with hanging out after work or something, then maybe that could be a place to start having honest conversations or something, where people build better relationships or something that then can trickle back down into the actual workday or, something.
Yeah, a skill that I use in some of the coaching that I do is this idea of an amnesty hour of with your employees, usually like once a month, maybe every other week if you need to, is to have an hour where the employee can tell you anything with no consequences or penalty. And that can be about the workplace. It can be critical feedback. It can be about their own life, about what's going on in their relationships, but just an hour without that fear of getting fired or losing their job or getting demoted or getting exiled. If you're a leader and you're open to it, again, if you have the emotional bandwidth to tolerate that, which is a big if, but if you can tolerate that, you're going to get so much good information that's going to make your business so much stronger. Absolutely. Because your employees know more about certain aspects of your business than you ever will, because they do it all day, every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I find is also the magic, where you can start seeing like how things relate to each other. Because especially I find emotional health and work culture so often has been like, oh, this is this and this is this. Like, let's not combine them. And it's just not true. It's like, and I've done a bit of coaching constellation work, which is kind of family constellations, but coaching. And you see things like, okay, like a coworker died, not even work related, they just passed away, but it hasn't been dealt with, and it's still kind of in there and in the team, and like everyone's feeling it, but no one spoke out that's what happened. There's so many things that are actually worth mentioning to get the flow back.
For sure. I don't know why people don't have that connection, that, like, especially in a small business or a small team, it is a family. So the same way that a family would deal with things like the death of a family member, or someone losing their job, or somebody getting sick, or somebody getting promoted and the like kind of going off to college kind of thing, right? Like all that stuff should be talked about in a family, should also be talked about in a team.
I mean, if you can, that's of course great.
So we're going to move into our final commercial break here. If you're enjoying the conversation, like us on social media, share the podcast, do all that stuff. Give us a 5-star review on Apple. We're trying to work on collecting some of those to get some more awareness. As we move into our next conversation, we're going to be talking directly to you, the listener, about if you're struggling with any of these things, where you might want to start, and what you could do to kind of start developing your sense of self and building emotional health. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the other side of the break.
In Mark's work with high performers and business owners, it is becoming increasingly clear to him that their biggest obstacle to success is themselves. They are experts in their field, but are dragged down by their anxiety, poor time management, inability to focus, or self-sabotage. His role is to help you overcome these emotional and organizational issues so that you can truly excel in your business and your personal life. One of the most common hurdles that he sees is perfectionism, a crippling anxiety around performance. It's a fear of not being good enough, being publicly embarrassed, or of disappointing others. These fears paralyze brilliant people and bring them to their knees. This course will help you to break free from this mental prison and have more agency in your world. In this online course, we will break down the prison of perfectionism so that you can break out of it. For more information and to sign up, visit mark-azoulay.teachable.com. That's Mark, MARC-Azoulay, AZOULAY.teachable.com. You are listening to From the Ashes with Mark Azoulay. To reach the show today, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. Or send an email to podcast@mark-azoulay.com. Now, back to From the Ashes.
Welcome to the final segment here. where we talk directly to the audience. And, a theme that's come up a lot on this show recently has been this great resignation. This idea that a lot of people are quitting their jobs and that they are looking for something better. And what we're noticing is that a lot of people are actually starting their own thing. They're either doing like gig work, or they're trying to start a business, or they're trying to become a coach. And I'm curious, Nicolina, what would you say to someone like that, right? That is kind of burnt out from their corporate job, that left because of maybe a toxic work environment, or they're not being seen or heard, and are deciding to kind of stake it out on their own. Where would you recommend that they start to build that emotional piece?
It depends a bit where they are. That's why I struggle a bit to give like, just do this. So the question, like I said earlier, is for me is like, really, do you, like, it kind of comes a bit back to this idea of what's your passion, I find. Like, do you already know what lights you up or what you want to engage in or not? Because sometimes people, for example, leave or do a job or something because they are already pulled towards something else. Sometimes, like you say, maybe they just kind of give up. In that case, I would actually start with first putting a lot of more like this traditional self-care in place. I mean, like, okay, just do things like do the artist's way, like do some, explore some of your ideas and passions and hobbies and see what resonates and see if anything sticks, for example, which can be great anyway, because you get usually in touch with yourself and explore things. But sometimes, people also like have a definite reason to leave because they just explored already something else. And then it's more like, it really depends, like which state are they in? Are they ready to build something, or are they not ready to build something? Because if they're ready to build, even if it's slowly, we can of course move into, okay, take some action around this thing. A question I often like to ask is, first of all, check like, well, is it working or is it not working? So for example, like if you're still deciding to leave or not, maybe start, how are you feeling? Like what's working for you? What is not working? And that could be anything, like, are you enjoying what you do? How's the money? How are the connections with others? How are your contribution, like the idea of fulfillment, like how do you feel with something? And you can do that no matter if it's in an employed job or if you're working for yourself or if you're thinking about it, like get clear around what you want. That's always a good start. And then the question is like, okay, so I think in your example, is it someone who wants to build something? Again, like I find often people already have an idea of what they want. At least maybe that's the people I attract, because they often like already have some passions or something. And then it's literally like, okay, for example, if you actually want to turn that into a business, great, let's do it. Let's start. Do you already have an idea of, for example, something you want to bring to the market, like to sell, like a painting, a service, I don't know. And then we go from there, really. That's how I would start normally.
Yeah, I think that's great. How would you work with somebody who is just resentful and burnt out of the current system? Because I think that's where a lot of these great resignation folks are in, where they're coming to it with a lot of just, anger, or they're coming to it with, getting triggered from past traumas, or from, not being seen or heard, or kind of feeling that they're on the hamster wheel. So I think they're coming in pretty charged, right? Because they've quit their job or they've made the jump, and they're not quite sure what they want to do, but they know they don't want to do what they have been doing.
Definitely. I mean, then I would definitely say start exploring something. I don't offer for example, the artist's way. I know it's a course myself so much, but I have other ways of, exploring things. But something like that, where you just really have maybe even a few weeks where you just explore different ideas and engage in them. Like try out playing piano, try out going for long hikes, try out, maybe connecting with some people you haven't connected in a while. Just anything that's different to what you've been doing. I mean, that's what my advice or suggestion is anyway. Like whenever you're in a funky state or you feel like you're not, things are not going the way you want, like the key bit is always to change your state, like of mind ideally. But how do you do that? By changing something. And again, we come back to the environment. If you don't know what to do, start changing your environment. And you could start with something where the kettle sits. Because the moment you put the kettle even just a meter somewhere else, you have an interrupt in your brain because you're not doing the same thing you've been doing every day, but you're actually doing something else. So that fraction of a moment could already give you like a little bit of a different perspective on something. And then of course you can build out to bigger things. That again, like it really depends, I find, where someone is. If you're ready to, have a weekend and do something like have a like dive or like do something crazy, you get so many new ideas of what's possible for you or what you can do. Great, do that.
Yeah.
So
that's really great advice because, what I'm hearing you say is using the novelty as a mirror for yourself to really study of like, okay, I'm going to go skydiving, right? It's not really about the skydiving. It's about how am I feeling before? What's coming up, right? What's it like when I'm on the edge of that plane? What's it like afterwards? How do I feel? Using it as a way to kind of deepen into yourself and create space for those new ideas. Yeah. Am I hearing that correctly?
Definitely. I think for me, it's kind of a thing I will always advocate. That's why maybe it's kind of built in for like, no matter where someone is, like I said, just at different stages. But changing things, and yeah, definitely. I mean, even the last 2 years, like that was so important because I think that's when people did have a hard time, is when they didn't do that and they just were doing the same thing over and over and over again. But if you can get creative, even in a 2 square meter space or something. And like, that's why I keep telling people, like, use your chair, like move your chair by 90 degrees. You have a different view. Things will be different already. I know it sounds kind of, really small and ridiculous, but it will make a difference. Change your clothes, anything will make a difference. Like if you have a particular path you walk every day, can you do it the other way around or something, all these things matter. And of course, then you can do visioning. Like, how do you imagine your ideal scenario? Like, where would you like to go? I mean, definitely we can do that if you feel like that's like if you really have no clue, sometimes like doing an exercise of just doing pure visualization and where do you see yourself in 2 years, who do you want to be with, in which environment do you want to be, that's great. I think I have one on YouTube if anyone fancies that. That's also an option, of course, that you can do. But like I said, like that's why I like to work one-on-one, because that kind of gives me a good feeling of where someone, like, where are they, in which state, and like, what do they need? Do they need the excitement? Do they need, first of all, to calm down because like they've been working so hard, they just have no energy anymore? Do we just bring everything right down and calm it down, first of all? I mean, you can do the same in groups, but I mean, of course, like, and if you do it for yourself, it's the same thing. Like, if you can build, like, find out like what you need in that moment, that's of course always great. I'm just thinking, maybe you have a nice idea. I'm thinking of maybe I have another good question. I mean, one thing I always also often say is like, can you, what would you do if you had to bring 1% more joy into your day? Like, joy is one of my go-to things. Like, I like to design things for joy. And that I find is also a great starting place to just be, okay, 1%. Like, I mean, you could do it with everything in your day, but even just start with one task or one thing. What makes that thing more enjoyable? And it could be music in the background. It could be, I don't want to work with that person, but I like this person, or I don't want to work that anymore at all. Or like, yeah, actually, I want to try out something else. Or I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you asked also for people who are ready, for example, to build a business, and that's a whole other section, of course.
Yeah, well, let's go right into that, right? How would you assess if someone's ready to build a business or not?
Well, if they think they are, they are. I mean, me as a coach, my job is to make sure, like, I always think usually people are. I don't think I get the ones who are completely disorientated normally. Obviously everyone has their ups and downs, and like recently I had a lady, and she, like, we wanted to work on her business, and honestly the first session, I mean, she had so much things happening in her private life, like suicidal teenager and whatnot. Of course we couldn't do that for a while, and we had to address other things first, but ultimately they would feed back into how she shows up for what she actually wants to do. So it was more kind of making sure she's in a good enough place so she can focus again on what she actually wants to focus in that case.
Yeah, I think that part is critical. Maybe it's because we're on, little different sides of the same coin here. From the therapy perspective, right? I'm a big advocate of like cleaning up your own house before you try to build another one, kind of thing. Of this idea
Yeah.
of course, that's it's not going to be perfect, but this idea of understanding your personal pitfalls, your traps, kind of discharging any emotional baggage that you might have, trying to work on relationships, get rid of toxic relationships, get substance abuse figured out. I think this stuff's really critical because there's a common phrase, and I think it's in recovery, but it's everywhere. Is no matter where you go, there you are. And there are people that leave jobs, right? That leave a company and then create the same prison for themselves down the line because that emotional baggage hasn't been really sorted and resolved.
Yeah, and yeah, it's true that you bring it up. I think I am a bit different there. I know that when I speak to my friends who are more on the therapeutic side of ends, and even in coaching, there are different sides. They tend to do that, and my journey has been very different. That again, because of teachers I met, they were starting to make sure I built stuff while I was, and I still heal. Like I said, it's ongoing for me. And that's why I normally offer that, because that's how I've seen it for myself. I mean, again, that's why I say it depends. There are cases where that's not possible, or you don't want it. If someone doesn't want to do that, fine. But I've seen the benefits for myself, which is why I love coaching, is to see where are we going, what's possible, like start putting things in place, even if they're tiny, but just to see, like, give you that future perspective. And that's, and I think coaching is a little bit more future oriented often. But yeah, I just seen great results with that. That's just my approach, I think.
Yeah. So what is one thing that you would like our listeners to take to heart?
Checking in with yourself, just like even right now, like, how do you feel? What is there something that's not there for you, or that you would like more of? Just what's coming up. Could be an emotion. Maybe you get something more tangible. Just like maybe put your hand on your heart and just be like, how am I doing? And what could make, like, once you've done that, you might need to stay with that a bit longer. And then just ask yourself if there's anything that would make your life that 1% more sparkling. Because there's always something.
I like that. It's kind of, adding a little bit of that sparkle. I think the language that I use is like, smoothing off those rough edges, but just trying to like do a little thing that can help create more ease and love and life in your life, which is, I think, really critical, right? And I think if you take care of those little things, the rest of the stuff falls in order because you don't have that drag. You don't have the kind of constant emotional drag that can keep you down.
Yeah, absolutely. And that I'm such a big, like, I spend hours talking about the little changes, like the music in the background, like I said, and the clothes and the flower and the right cup of tea, because that's how you feel great, even if you have to write something you don't like or whatever.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's great advice. So as we're wrapping up here, tell us a little bit more about where people can find you online, what you offer. If people want to learn more about you, where should they go?
Yeah, I mean, you can go to nicolinawerther.com. Like I said, it's in the process of being updated, but it gives you an idea of what I do. And there's also a page which has, you find it's called /free-resources, where there's a checklist, for example, for shy and sensitive people at work. Like if you feel like, oh, I'm not heard and I never get what I want, that could be a great start to get some ideas of how you enjoy your work more, just get more out of it, for example, by ultimately becoming more yourself and building more of that sense of self.
Fantastic. That's great. Well, thank you all for tuning in. Again, promoting, sharing, doing all this stuff really helps this podcast to grow. I really appreciate you listening and hearing these stories of, going from defeat into triumph. And we'll see you next week on another episode of From the Ashes.
Thank you for joining host Mark Azoulay on From the Ashes. Be sure to tune in again live next Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time and 11 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel, or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Meet triumph and defeat and treat those two imposters the same.